Hi, this is Eric Smith. Time to do another quick look video, and I thought I would do it on a verse from the Old Testament that many Christians will quote. In fact, we quote the last part of the verse, and it's very familiar. Have you ever seen anybody come into the church that's wearing clothes that might be flamboyant or immodest, or they have jewelry that's flamboyant, or they have their hairstyle a certain way, and they just may look kind of wild and it just brings attention to them? And sometimes we want to be careful about judging them prematurely, but we may want to speak to those people about how you should dress in the church. And then a Christian will jump up and say, hey, man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And we'll say that to kind of squash any discernment or judgment. Well, that end of the verse comes from 1 Samuel 16:7, and I just want to do a quick look on it to show you that when we take the end of the verse that way, we're actually taking it out of context. So let's read it. But the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance, or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. In chapter 16 of 1 Samuel, Samuel was sent to the house of Jesse to look for a new king that God would anoint. And Samuel's looking at all of Jesse's sons, and he looks at a particular son and thinks, this must be the man. He must be God's anointed. But then the beginning of verse 7 says, but the Lord said unto Samuel. So the Lord's speaking to Samuel directly about it. And it says, look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature. So the Lord's telling him, don't look at his countenance, which talks about his beauty or how handsome he is or how desirable he looks. And he says, or the height of his stature. Don't look at how tall he is or how strong he may be. And then it says this, because I have refused him. So God is telling Samuel that he refused this particular son of Jesse that he thinks should be God's anointed. God's saying, no, I refused him. And then he gives the reason why. He says, for the Lord seeth not as man seeth. So he's letting Samuel know, I don't look at someone the way you look at someone. Because man will look at what? How handsome someone is, how tall someone is, how strong someone is. And we'll equate that to leadership. Or we'll equate it to someone being completely qualified for a particular office. And the Lord's saying, no. You see that way, but I don't. And then the last part of the verse is the part that we quote a lot, and it says this, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Well, what is the outward appearance that we're talking about here? We're talking about the stature of the person, how tall he is. We're talking about how he looks, how beautiful or desirable he is. And God's saying, I don't look at that. I look at the heart. And of course, we know that the heart is the mind, the soul, and the intent of the person. It's what they're thinking and what they believe and what they desire. Does it line up with God's purposes in following God? And that's what God's looking at. He's not looking at the outward appearance. Dear Christian, many times we'll see people walk into the church and they may not be dressed appropriately, or they may be dressed flamboyantly. Now, please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that when people come into church, we need to just stare at them and judge them and jump all over them. They could be new believers, or they could be an unsaved person walking in your church, and we want to welcome them. We want them to hear the gospel. But we don't want to use the end of this verse to say, well, you know what? We're looking at their outward appearance, their clothing, their jewelry, the way they style their hair, but God looks at their heart. That's not the context of this verse. This verse is talking about the stature of somebody. It's talking about how good that person looks as it pertains to God choosing them for a particular office. And when we think about those other things that we think that God doesn't look at, there's Bible verses that actually say that God does look at those things. In Exodus 39, we have a whole chapter about the garments of the priests, and they're detailed things about the garments. So God cares about that. In Leviticus 19:27, we have a prohibition to the nation of Israel for the men not to cut their hair or cut their beards or style it a particular way because the pagans did that. And in Leviticus 19:28, we're told that they shouldn't even mark up their body and put carvings on their body. Now, We may equate that to tattoos today, and that's another subject. We're not going to get into that. But there was a prohibition for that because it was on their skin. And then in the New Testament, in 1 Timothy 2:9 and 1 Peter 3:3, we have a warning about women wearing immodest clothing and wearing gold or having elaborate braided hair to bring attention to themselves. They're not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to come into church and people are looking at what they're dressed in or how they look. They're coming in the house of God to worship God. So God does care about the clothes we wear. God does care how we style ourselves, how we look. This verse is not a leeway or a stamp of approval to just come into church and dress the way you want to dress. Now again, we're not going to judge people for that, and we have to be really discerning about that. But we should not use the end of 1 Samuel 16:7 to do that. So I just wanted to do a quick look on this verse just to encourage you that this verse isn't talking about anybody can dress anyway and come into the church and we can just say, well, God looks at their heart so they can just dress the way they want to dress. No, they need to walk with God and understand that their clothing is a reflection of their attitude. Their clothing is actually a reflection of their heart, and God does look at their heart. As always, if the videos on this channel have encouraged your Christian walk, but you have not subscribed to my channel yet and you want to, hit the button. If you want to leave any comments, please do so, but please don't be snarky. Please do not be profane. We want to be Christ-like in everything we say and do. And until we do another quick look, remember something, Christian. We can come into church. We don't always have to be in a suit and tie, and don't always have to dress elaborately and, ultra conservatively. I understand all that. You can wear casual clothes and you can look nice. But if your clothes are bringing attention to you, and it's a statement about you, then you know what? You're trying to rob God of his glory in the respect of you come to church to worship and honor him. You don't come in to worship and honor yourself. So just remember that next time, and please do not use the end of this verse for that reason to say, hey, it's okay to do that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and God bless.